I discovered Mason's infidelity in the new wedding apartment my parents had prepared for us. The house had just been renovated a few days prior. Since I was busy with work and couldn't find time to visit, I gave the keys to my fiancé, Mason, so he could air it out by opening the windows. He went there in the morning. In the afternoon, when I called to check on him, no one answered. Assuming he was busy cleaning up the new place, I headed straight there after finishing work. Mason, you think that bitch Teresa would ever suspect I'm lying on the meticulously chosen bedsheets in her wedding home, tangled up with you? What do you think her reaction would be? The new apartment has 1 elevator per household. I had just registered my fingerprint and stepped into the entrance hall when, before I could call for Mason, I heard a coquettish voice. I froze in place, listening to the conversation unfolding inside. So what if she finds out? She's nothing but a useless hen who can't even lay eggs. If it weren't for her parents' money, do you really think I'd marry her? The voice was all too familiar. It was my fiancé, Mason. His words sent the woman into even more delighted laughter. I stood at the entrance, trembling with rage, and found myself frozen in place for what felt like an eternity, forced to listen to their passionate display. After what seemed like an eternity, I clenched my fists tightly to regain my composure, turned on my phone's video recording, and stepped forward, capturing the intimate moment between the two of them on the bed. Mason. Ah. The woman's moans turned into a shriek the moment she saw me. Mason, drenched in sweat, stared at me wide-eyed, his previously half-lidded gaze now brimming with shock, and gasped, "Teresa." Then, he suddenly jolted in shock, instinctively stepping back before his legs gave way and he collapsed onto the bed. The sight was too graphic, staring any longer might give him a sty. I took a few steps back, looking at the naked couple, and said, "This bedding set is brand new silk. I'll have professionals assess the damage to the other items in the room, and I'll send you the bill tonight." Glancing at Mason, whose face turned ashen then pale, I turned and walked away without another word. What a pity for this house. My parents had invested a fortune in renovating it, and now, it seems we'll have to sell it off. Teresa. Mason chased after me just as I reached the car. His shirt was buttoned wrong, and his zipper was stuck. He looked utterly disheveled. After fixing the zipper, Mason asked me, "Where are you heading now?" "Go home. Delete what you just recorded." He spoke without a trace of the awkwardness one might expect from being caught cheating, only sheer entitlement. Holding the phone, I stared at him and sneered, "And then what?" "I'll marry you, everything stays the same." He spoke, his tone dripping with condescension. Staring at him for a few seconds, I said, "Got piss at least?" He frowned, "What? No mirror? Fine, take a leak and see for yourself what kind of trash you are. Marry me? You're not even worthy." After giving him a cold glance, I opened the car door and drove away. He blocked the car with a vicious expression, saying, "Teresa, think carefully. Apart from me, who else would marry a woman without a uterus? If you call off this wedding now, be prepared to spend the rest of your life alone." Looking at the blocked road ahead, I pursed my lips and thought silently. Seeing my hesitation, he said, "I know you're upset about today, but I promise I won't bring her again next time." $1 million, not a bad deal, I interrupted him, tapping the steering wheel. He was stunned. "What?" I started the car, released the handbrake, and stepped on the accelerator, saying coldly, "Killing you and paying $1 million in compensation, I won't lose out." The car sped toward him, and his face instantly turned pale. Just as it was about to hit him, I hadn't expected him to be pulled away by the woman who had followed him down. "Teresa, how dare you commit murder in broad daylight?" The woman, terrified, glared at me and screamed. "I know this woman, she's my colleague Snow, with whom I've always had a bad relationship." I slammed on the brakes, turned to look at Mason, who had turned pale from fear, and sneered, "Pathetic." Then, holding up my phone, I added, "Don't worry, I'll share the video of your in-depth exchange with my friends for their viewing pleasure. No need to fret about me keeping it to myself." Ignoring the curses from behind the car, I drove straight home. I met Mason 3 years ago in a car accident. At the time, I swerved to avoid a stray cat crossing the road but turned the steering wheel the wrong way, causing the car to flip over. It was Mason who happened to pass by, called the police for me, and accompanied me to the hospital. The accident injured my abdomen, and to save my life, the doctors had to remove my uterus. Because of this, I fell into depression. Mason stayed by my side the whole time, and over time, we got together. My parents saw that not only had he saved me, but he also didn't hold my infertility against me. So when we were discussing marriage, they took out their lifelong savings. Even though it was their daughter getting married, they bought us a marital home, furnished it, and even paid for Mason's parents' medical treatment and retirement. Even Mason's current job was secured by my father pulling strings everywhere over these past 3 years, elevating him from a security guard to a bank manager. I originally thought he was a good man, never expecting he'd turn out to be trash. When I got home, I told my parents everything that happened today and immediately brought up canceling the engagement. After learning the whole story, my parents were furious too and agreed to call off the wedding. All the money for the wedding preparations had been paid by my parents, so now that the engagement is cancelled, there's nothing to refund to Mason's family. As for Mason, my dad transferred him $500,000 to buy a car, and that money needs to be retrieved. As for the rest, consider it a repayment for the emergency call he made for me back then. However, before I could even approach Mason to get the money back, my friends, colleagues, and family suddenly messaged me, asking why I had hit Mason with my car. I was completely baffled and only realized after checking that a video of me supposedly hitting Mason with my car yesterday had been uploaded online. The title read, "Rich Girl Attempts Murder on the Street, Arrogantly Boasting That $1 million Can Buy a Life." The topic was highly controversial, and with how fast news spreads online, it didn't take long for the video to go viral. So all my close friends immediately came to ask me what had happened. I didn't have time to reply to these questions from my friends. I quickly checked my phone. Unsurprisingly, I had been scolded onto the trending list. Some netizens found my private account and started attacking indiscriminately. There were already countless private messages. Some self-proclaimed righteous netizens also began doxing me frantically. My home address and workplace were almost completely exposed. As the situation grew increasingly serious, I made a prompt decision to take my parents to stay at a hotel. After all, they were older, and they couldn't withstand the stress of such a big scandal. After settling my parents, I went to find Mason. Mason was soaking in the hot spring with snow, and when I arrived, the two were still flirting in the pool. When he saw me, Mason waved and said, "You got here pretty fast. Come give me a back rub." 3 years, I don't know how blind I must have been to be entangled with someone like this for 3 years. Suppressing my disgust, I asked, "Was it you who posted the video?" He nodded, his face full of smug satisfaction. "Oh, you mean that video of you hitting me with your car? It was an accident, really. But I have to say, netizens these days are full of righteous indignation. I'm quite touched, actually. What trash. Mason, I can sue you for defamation." "Huh." He laughed with a fearless arrogance. "Go ahead and sue, Teresa. The car is yours, the words were yours, it's all crystal clear in the video. Did I defame or slander you?" He shook his head, laughing arrogantly. "No, I didn't. I was just telling the truth." I was so angry at him I could hardly breathe. But there was nothing I could do to him at the moment. He was right about one thing, I really did want to run him over. And yes, I was the one who said I'd pay $1 million to take his life. Looking at him and suppressing the anger in my chest, I said, "Mason, what do you want?" He came ashore, walked up to me, and looked down at me condescendingly. "Nothing much. Even though your reputation is ruined and you're barren, it's fine. I don't mind. Just delete that video of me and Snow, and I'll still marry you." Disgusting beyond words. Suppressing the urge to tear his revolting face to shreds, I glanced at Snow standing smugly behind him. Knowing full well he had ulterior motives, I asked, "Is that all?" He raised his eyebrows. "Snow is pregnant, and she's going to keep the baby." It'll be raised under your name. Huh. I was so furious I laughed. Mason, where do you get the nerve to think I'd agree to such a disgusting request? You could refuse. He took a step closer, bending down to lower his voice. But the video will stay online. I'm sure the resourceful netizens will eventually uncover your workplace, and your parents' address too. Your father's position must have plenty of people eyeing it, right? TSK, at his age, do you think he could handle losing his job because of his daughter? You're despicable. No problem, take your time to consider. We're in no hurry. With that, he turned around, put his arm around Snow, and walked away. I stood there, seething with anger to the point of wanting to kill, yet powerless to do anything. My father is a public official. He's worked diligently for half his life to reach his current position. If at this age he were to end up with his reputation in ruins, I can't even imagine how devastated he would be. That despicable Mason, he was certain I wouldn't gamble with my parents' money. So, he shamelessly brought Snow to disgust me, forcing me to agree to his revolting demands. Standing by the pool, my thoughts were in chaos. I had assumed that breaking off the engagement would free me from that scoundrel, but I had underestimated human nature. The water's shallow, it won't drown you. A low voice sounded from behind. Startled, I turned and unexpectedly met a pair of deep, restrained eyes. The man had striking features, and as I stared at him, his brows slightly furrowed. If you want to end your life, you'll need to find another spot. I quickly shook my head in denial. I wasn't trying to kill myself, I just thinking about how to deal with them? The man interrupted me, his dark eyes calmly watching me. I froze for a moment, then nodded, realizing belatedly, why were you eavesdropping on my conversation? He glanced around and replied indifferently, this is a public place. The implication was that our conversation was disturbing him. At a loss for words, I took a deep breath and turned to leave. I can help you, the man suddenly spoke up. What do you mean? The online videos can be easily dealt with. His voice was calm, betraying no emotion. I don't understand, why? I don't believe in getting free lunches from heaven. He looked at me, his gaze calm as ever, marry me, and I'll clean up the videos online for you. Imagine one day, you encounter a man on the street so handsome he breaks the sky's limit. He suddenly stops you and says he can solve all your current problems, on one condition, you have to marry him. What would you do? No suspense, of course, you'd run without stopping, it's definitely a scam. But I stayed. I also patiently read through all the materials he provided about himself. The man's name is Cashin, a businessman based in City C. Staring at the names of several major companies under his ownership, ones I knew all too well, I widened my eyes and exclaimed, so you really are Cashin, the wealthiest man in City C? He pursed his lips, I do have some assets under my name. Why? I was even more puzzled. There must be hundreds of women lining up to marry you, even abroad. Why me? Besides, you don't even know me. He stared at me intently for a moment, his voice slightly hoarse. You really don't remember me? I was utterly confused, my eyes wide as I kept staring at him. Have we met before? Perhaps feeling uneasy under my gaze, he shook his head. No. I can assure you, I truly don't know him, but he said he could help remove the online videos. Thinking of my parents who are still in the hotel, worried and at a loss. I asked, Cashin, is it really true that if I marry you, you'll help me? He looked at me and didn't answer my question directly. Instead, he asked, are you willing? Just kidding, what reason could I possibly have to say no to a powerful, handsome guy? Cashin, I need to tell you about my situation first. Since this involves marriage, I explained, 3 years ago, I was in a car accident and had my uterus removed. This means I can't have children like a normal woman. Marrying me might not hold any value for you. He furrowed his brows slightly and remained silent for a moment. Thinking he might be hesitating, I added, though I don't know why you want to marry me, I believe you have the right to know this. If you regret it now, it's A woman's worth is never determined by her ability to bear children, he suddenly interrupted me, his deep black eyes locking onto mine. Besides, you are priceless just as you are. I froze for a second, overwhelmed with indescribable emotions. Was he trying to comfort me with those words? On that very day, I and Cashin registered our marriage. When my parents found out about it, it took them a while to digest the news. My father, fearing that I might have been deceived, made numerous phone calls to inquire about Cashin's identity. The results all confirmed that Cashin was indeed the richest man in City C, with an excellent reputation for both character and personality in his circles. Just like me, they couldn't help but ask Cashin the same question, why? Why choose me? Cashin's answer to them was that he had fallen in love at first sight with me. I don't believe it. But since the marriage certificate has already been issued, why he married me is no longer important. What matters now is addressing the videos online. I worry delaying any longer might lead to trouble. The way the wealthy handle public opinion truly amazed me. He simply threw money at the issue and pushed up the popularity of other videos online. Soon, my videos were taken down, and within just a few days, the whole matter had blown over. Searching online now, there's almost no trace of me left. It's as if the cyberbullying I endured was just an illusion. So effortlessly, the problem was resolved. Looking at Cashin, I grew increasingly puzzled. I asked him, "Did you really fall in love with me at first sight?" He nodded, looking at me and asked, "How do you plan to handle the wedding?" Huh? I was almost stunned. The wedding? He raised an eyebrow. You're marrying me. Aren't you planning to have a wedding? Of course, we should have one, but we've only known each other for a short while. Rushing to get the marriage certificate is already beyond my comprehension, and now having a wedding so quickly? To be honest, I feel quite uneasy about it. He probably sensed my thoughts and said, "The wedding is set in 3 months. How about we spend these 3 months together to build our relationship?" I nodded and agreed. So in the following days, Cashin and I began to develop our bond. Mason probably thought I had no way to deal with the video circulating online and was waiting for me to beg him for mercy, so he brazenly flaunted his relationship with Snow. My friends and colleagues all assumed that because of the online scandal, Mason had dumped me. Although they occasionally disparaged Mason for being too harsh, dumping me and immediately getting involved with someone else. But on the surface, they didn't say much. After all, everyone had seen online how I spent $1 million trying to run Mason over. Faced with such a violent and unreasonable fiancé like me, Mason's eagerness to move on to the next one seemed understandable. But what Mason didn't expect was that the online video was forcibly taken down within a few days. So when he came to pick up Snow after work, he cornered me downstairs at the company. Not seeing him for a few days, he became even more repulsive. Despite wearing high-quality clothes, they looked utterly charmless on him. I don't know what was wrong with me before, thinking he was someone I could entrust my life to. When I saw him, I just glanced at him and was about to walk right past. He blocked my way, looking at me with a sneer. "Teresa, I didn't expect you to have some tricks up your sleeve. Did you use your parents' meager retirement savings to suppress the trending topics?" At the mention of money, I stopped in my tracks and turned to him. "Mason, it seems you haven't seen the message I sent you. Since you want to renege on paying back the money, my next step will be to sue you directly." His face stiffened. "Teresa, that $500,000 was given to me by your parents to buy a car." "What? Are you planning to call off the wedding? Marry you?" I laughed as if hearing the most ridiculous joke. "A rotten scumbag through and through. I'd have to be out of my mind to marry you." "You," he glared at me angrily, then seemed to think of something and suddenly sneered. "I see you're just being stubborn. Don't think just because the video was taken down, everything's fine. Teresa, don't forget, your reputation in this circle has long been ruined. And the fact that you can't have children? Let me tell you, everyone around you already knows. Right now, besides me, no one would want you anymore." I looked at him and couldn't help but burst out laughing. "So, you think I should be groveling at your feet now, full of gratitude?" He frowned. Isn't that right? A woman like you, who else would want you? Whether I can get married or not is none of your concern. I said coldly, glancing at him. Mason, I'll give you 3 days to return every penny my father transferred to you without missing a single cent. As for the things you and your woman soiled in my new home, I've already sent you the bill. You'd better compensate at full price. As for the video of you and Snow, I smirked, watching his face turn livid. I'm still thinking about how to ruin the both of you, you despicable pair. Teresa, you're looking for death. Mason, furious and humiliated, raised his hand to hit me, but he didn't get the chance. Cashin, who had come to pick me up from work, intercepted his raised hand. His wrist nearly crushed by Cashin, Mason cried out in pain. If it hadn't been for the fact that they were outside my company, Mason's hand would probably have been ruined. Shoving Mason away, Cashin gave him a cold glare. If I ever see you lay a finger on her again, you'll regret it. Trembling under Cashin's icy gaze, Mason glared at me and demanded, Teresa, who the hell is this? Linking my arm with Cashin's, I looked at Mason and said, let me introduce you, my husband, Cashin. Heh. Mason sneered, looking at Cashin with disdain. Teresa, I thought you had so much backbone to defy me. Turns out you just paid for some pretty boy to stand here waiting for me. He scrutinized Cashin with contempt, jeering, this kind of trash must have cost you a fortune, huh? How much did you spend? Does he even satisfy you? Slap, that slap was aimed straight at Mason's face. I put so much force into it that my palm went numb from the pain. Caught off guard, Mason froze for a moment before erupting in fury. You dare hit me? Teresa, I'll kill you today. His eyes turned bloodshot as he lunged at me. Cashin shielded me behind him, but this time he didn't strike. Instead, 2 black-suited bodyguards swiftly restrained the enraged Mason. Mason, held firmly by the 2 bodyguards, spewed curses in fury. Cashin shot a cold glance at the guards and said darkly, find a secluded spot and clean this up. Once the arrangements were made, he led me to the car. Mason was dragged away by the 2 bodyguards. In the car, I stared at him blankly and cautiously said, Cashin, murder is illegal. Although I also really wish Mason would disappear from this world immediately. He paused, looked down at me, and seemed to even smile at the corner of his mouth. So, are you going to call the police to arrest me now? Ah? I quickly shook my head, no. I wouldn't. Watching the smile at the corner of his mouth widen, I blinked a few times and tentatively asked, how would they deal with him? He didn't reply to me, but instead, a bouquet of cappuccino roses appeared in my arms. I lowered my gaze to the vibrant blooms in my embrace and looked at him blankly. What's this? For my wife, he said, his deep, dark eyes unfathomable, the indulgent smile at his lips impossibly charming. I froze abruptly, staring at him in shock. How could someone make the word wife sound so tender and affectionate? Meeting his dark gaze, my heartbeat quickened unnaturally. Noticing my silence, he asked, don't you like them? No, I really like it. I shook my head and rubbed my flushed cheeks. This man was truly hard not to be moved by. I wasn't sure what flowers you'd like, but the florist said most girls love these. As he spoke, he handed me a small cake. Have this to tide you over. We'll grab dinner later. I averted my gaze and murmured softly, thank you. The strange feeling in my chest made my voice come out slightly hoarse. He still wore that charming smile as he started the car, seeming to be in a good mood. After calming my pounding heart, I glanced back, still curious about how he would deal with Mason. As if reading my thoughts, a pleasant male voice sounded in my ear, don't worry, I just had them teach him a lesson. Nothing illegal. That's good. I wouldn't want scum like Mason to dirty his hands. Cashin took me to a restaurant. After dinner, he drove me back home. Standing at the entrance of my apartment complex, I bid him farewell, drive safely. He hummed an acknowledgement, then suddenly called out, Teresa. I turned to look at him, meeting his beautiful eyes, and my heart skipped a beat. What's wrong? How do you feel about me after these past few days? He looked at me, his expression serious yet tinged with nervousness, and upon closer inspection, the tips of his ears were slightly flushed. I instinctively tightened my grip on the bouquet in my arms. Everything's been great. I'm truly terrible with words and don't know how to compliment people. He let out a slight sigh of relief and smiled faintly. All right, then I'll keep working hard. Faintly, I felt there was something a bit odd about our conversation, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was at the moment. However, this sense of oddness became clear to me when I got home and my parents asked me when I planned to move in with Cashin. What Cashin really wanted to ask might have been. Ding dong. A message came through on my phone. It was from Cashin. Asleep? After hesitating for a moment, I called him directly. He picked up almost instantly, and his pleasant voice came through. Not asleep? Just lying down, I replied, then added after a pause, why did you suddenly ask me that question tonight? What do you think of me as a person? There was a pause on the other end before the voice continued. Actually, I wanted to ask if you've started to like me even a little? I froze, staring at the ceiling in silence. A soft chuckle came through the phone. Did I scare you? No, I pressed my lips together and replied, haven't we already gotten married? A faint sigh reached my ears. I'm sorry. I could have helped you directly from the start without forcing you to marry me, but I don't regret it. I spoke up, interrupting him. If I could go back to that time, I would still say yes. When we registered our marriage, part of it was my concern for my parents' safety and the urgent need for help, but more than that, it was because of him. If it had been someone else, I might not have agreed at all. He didn't take advantage of my vulnerability, nor did he pressure me with his influence. It was my own choice. The line fell silent, and my heart couldn't help but tense up. Was I too blunt? So, you do like me a little too, came a deep, pleasant voice from the other end. I pursed my lips, my face involuntarily growing warm. Anyway, marrying you is me taking advantage of you. The person on the other end of the phone seemed to chuckle. Then shall this man, who's being taken advantage of, come pick you up tomorrow morning? Okay. After hanging up, I clutched my wildly pounding chest, still feeling somewhat unreal. After 3 years with Mason, I had never felt like this before. So this is what being in love feels like. Mason was badly beaten, and the news spread the very next day. My parents called me to the hospital, thinking his accident might have something to do with me, so they rushed over. When I arrived, Mason was already wrapped up like a mummy. Seeing me, he could barely speak coherently, and when the police questioned him, he just mumbled for a long time without making any sense. Only Snow was shouting on the side, claiming that I had hired someone to beat him up. But without any evidence, the police left after taking our statements. My parents, seeing that the matter had nothing to do with me, offered a few polite words to Mason out of humanitarian concern before leaving. As I was about to leave, Mason, lying on the hospital bed, weakly called out to me, Teresa, stop right there. I glanced at him sideways, utterly disgusted, and said, spit it out if you have something to say. His eyes widened in anger. You really want to break off the engagement? For that pretty boy? I found it amusing and crossed my arms, looking at him as I said, his name is Cashin. We've already registered our marriage. Out of respect for the fact that you once saved me, I'll save you a wedding invitation. He stared at me intensely, his gaze as if I had murdered his entire family. After a long pause, he finally spat out, fine, you've got guts. Not in the mood to waste words on him, I left with a final remark, don't forget to pay back the money. Mason returned the money he owed me only after a week. I was originally planning to sue him directly, given that someone like him might very well try to avoid paying. However, there was another thing that surprised me. Mason publicly announced his marriage to Snow. It was unexpected, yet not entirely surprising. Because of this, my friends, worried that I might be upset, invited me out for some shopping. After all, Mason and I had been together for 3 years, and it had ended in such a way. Everyone thought I would struggle to accept it and might not be able to move on. I told them about Cashin and me getting our marriage certificate, but they all just assumed I was acting impulsively out of shock, marrying the first man I could find. I really couldn't explain Cashin's identity properly, so I just let them think whatever they wanted. Meanwhile, I ran into Mason's mother at the mall, accompanied by another woman. That woman bore some resemblance to Snow in her features, and my friend told me she was Snow's mother. The two were there to pick out wedding items for Mason and Snow. They had just announced their engagement and were already eagerly preparing, quite efficient, I must say. When Mason's mother saw me, she seemed a bit awkward at first. But as Snow's mother kept saying things like, "My daughter is fertile, once they're married, she'll definitely give your family 2 grandchildren in 3 years, the awkwardness faded. Her gaze toward me gradually became full of disdain. My friend was indignant and pulled me aside, saying, "What right does she have to put on that face in front of you? If it weren't for your parents paying for her treatment and you running around to take care of her when she was hospitalized, she'd be dead by now, a whole family of ungrateful wretches." I didn't really mind, after all, Mason had saved me before, and all of this could be considered repayment for that favor. After leaving the mall, my friend went to the restroom. Mason's mother came over to me and said with feigned sympathy, "Teresa, I heard about what happened between you and Mason. Relationships between men and women are all predestined by fate. Don't blame Mason. Snow is pregnant. How can a man go through life without a child? Mason had no choice. If only you could conceive, he wouldn't have." Huh, so all the dirty things Mason did are now being blamed on me? Trash will always be trash, why do they have to pin their rotten behavior on others? My friend came back and scolded Mason's mother, "If your family didn't like Teresa because she can't have children, you shouldn't have gotten involved with her in the first place. Not only did you waste 3 years of her life, but you and your son took, reaping all the benefits. And now you're throwing mud at her, how disgusting can you be?" My friend had a loud voice, and people coming in and out of the mall turned to look. Mason's mother's face turned an angry shade of purple, but she couldn't refute my friend's words right away. In the end, she squeezed out one sentence at me, "Teresa, if you could have children, none of this would have happened. A woman who can't bear kids, aren't you afraid of becoming a laughingstock if word gets out?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for the people around to hear. Being publicly discussed about my own embarrassment, no matter how strong my tolerance was, it was hard not to feel uncomfortable. Instinctively, I wanted to hide when a large hand suddenly wrapped around my waist, pulling me into an embrace. Recognizing the familiar scent, I froze for a moment, turning around to meet Cashin's icy gaze. His demeanor was cold and imposing. Standing over 6 feet tall, his stare at Mason's mother was terrifyingly frigid. "Isn't your son living off others considered a joke?" Having her veil of shame torn off so bluntly, Mason's mother was so furious that her eyes widened, and she pointed at him, ready to unleash a torrent of curses. Someone in the crowd suddenly said, "Isn't that Cashin, the richest man in Sea City?" Seeing people raising their phones to film him, I grew worried about causing him trouble and tried to pull him away. Unexpectedly, he held me back. Confused, I looked at him as he led me to the center of the mall. "Teresa, I am your husband, Cashin. Happy birthday. Also, may I formally propose to you once more?" Suddenly, Cashin's image appeared on the electronic screen at the mall's center. Holding flowers, his handsome face wore a smile, and his gaze was filled with affection. I was a bit dazed and turned to look at Cashin beside me, not noticing when he had gotten a bouquet of flowers and a velvet box in his hands, containing a massive diamond ring. "Cashin, you..." I hadn't even started speaking. Suddenly, he knelt on one knee, offering me the flowers and the ring, saying, "Teresa, may I have the honor of putting this ring on your finger?" The crowd quickly caught on, erupting in cheers as everyone excitedly chanted, "Say yes, say yes." Everything happened so unexpectedly, I could only feel my heartbeat racing frighteningly fast at this moment, with an indescribable joy surging in my heart. The next day, touching the enormous diamond ring on my ring finger, it still felt like a dream. "Teresa, I never expected your husband to be Cashin, that's the wealthiest man in Sea City. You're absolutely amazing. Right? You really pulled off something huge in silence." I never thought a billionaire could be so romantic, I'm almost jealous of you. In the office, my colleagues were chattering away one after another. I held back a smile, genuinely unsure of how to respond at the moment. Yesterday, Cashin's proposal was way too high profile, and given his special status, almost everyone knows about our marriage by now. Naturally, Mason found out about this too. This time, he came straight to my office. His injuries hadn't fully healed yet, but when I saw him, I deliberately ignored him. However, he took the initiative to approach me, his face dark as he said, "Teresa, did you really marry that Cashin? Do you need to see the marriage certificate?" I didn't bother looking at him and casually retorted. He pressed his lips together without saying a word. It was rush hour, and I had no intention of engaging with him, so I packed my things to leave. He blocked my way, looking somewhat conflicted. "Teresa, Mason, are you here to pick me up after work?" Snow stood not far away, holding her bag with a forced smile on her face. Mason glanced at her and said, "Wait for me downstairs first." Instead of leaving, Snow looked at me, then walked over to Mason and intimately linked arms with him. "Mason, I'm feeling a bit unwell. Could you accompany me to the hospital?" she said. Frowning, Mason replied, "Call my mom and have her go with you." As he spoke, he pried Snow's hand off his arm. Noticing his action, Snow froze, her expression turning sour as she glared at me. I couldn't be bothered to watch their little drama, so I grabbed my bag and prepared to leave. But as I passed by Snow, she suddenly took 2 steps back and let out a scream, dramatically falling backward, only for Mason to catch her. What happened next was quite entertaining. The moment Snow steadied herself, she turned tearful eyes toward me and said, "Teresa, I know you and Mason have been together for years. It was wrong of me to interfere in your relationship. It's all my fault, but—" "It is your fault," I cut in. Snow's face stiffened, and she choked on her next words. I sneered at her, "Are you about to say I shouldn't have pushed you because you're pregnant?" Her face went pale as she tried to speak. I didn't even try to hide my disgust and said bluntly, "How theatrical. Good thing you're too ugly to be an actress, otherwise, you'd have made the audience sick. If you're going to frame someone, at least put some effort into it. Do you really think everyone's brain is full of shit, letting you scheme however you want?" I couldn't stand the disgusting behavior of that trashy couple, so I immediately walked out of the company without a second thought. Cashin came to pick me up as usual. He was incredibly handsome, standing there in a custom-tailored black suit at the foot of the office building, drawing frequent glances from passers-by. As I walked out, I saw 2 girls mustering the courage to approach him, seemingly wanting to say hello. "Hubby," I called out, not giving him a chance to react before throwing myself into his arms. Cashin froze for a few seconds before pulling me into his arms with a laugh, asking, "What made you so happy?" "Just watched a terrible show," I said casually while pulling him into the car. He raised an eyebrow and, as usual, handed me the pastries he'd brought before buckling my seatbelt. Out of habit, I asked, "Where are we going later?" "Meeting the parents." Before entering Cashin's home, I had mentally prepared myself. Given Cashin's social status and background, his family structure was bound to be more complex than that of an ordinary family. But now, facing an elderly man and a young person before me, I was a bit taken aback. Cashin's grandfather looked at me kindly and said with a smile, "Teresa, you're slimmer than in the photos. Has Cashin not been taking good care of you?" I quickly shook my head and greeted Grandpa with a smile. "Auntie, my name is Noah. You're even prettier than in the pictures." The child, about 7 or 8 years old, looked at me with bright eyes. Noah is Cashin's nephew, 8 years old this year. Seeing only these 2 in the enormous villa, I was curious but didn't ask too many questions. However, during dinner, I roughly learned about the situation of the Chin family. Cashin's parents passed away early, and his grandfather raised Cashin and his older brother. But 2 years ago, Cashin's older brother and sister-in-law died in a car accident, leaving behind only the young Noah. Now, the Cashin family only has the old man, the young one, and Cashin. After finishing the meal and exchanging pleasantries with the old man, we were ready to leave. Noah followed us out, and the little boy suddenly hugged me, saying, "Auntie, thank you." Thinking he was thanking me for the gifts I brought him, I ruffled his hair and then left with Cashin. In the car, I couldn't help but look at Cashin and say, "I keep feeling like Grandpa and Noah have known me for a long time, and you too. It's like you all are very familiar with me." Cashin glanced at me with a slight smile and said, "You're going to be the lady of this house, so of course you should get familiar with it." I didn't believe him, but I couldn't figure it out at the moment, so I casually brought up Noah. How did Noah get the scar on his arm? When he hugged me earlier, I accidentally touched it. The scar was quite large. "It's from a car accident 2 years ago," Cashin replied, his tone neutral, betraying no emotion. Knowing that his brother and sister-in-law had died in that car crash, I didn't press further, though my heart ached a little more for Noah. Seeing my silence, Cashin looked at me and said, "He depends on you a lot." I smiled lightly. "It's affection, not dependence." Hard to believe you're such a high achiever yet can't even use words properly. I could also sense Noah's affection for me. Ever since I arrived at Cashin's home, he stayed close to me, following me everywhere, utterly endearing. He looked at me, remained silent for a moment, and then said, "Teresa, don't you remember Snow?" I was drawn by a familiar crimson figure in the distance, and upon closer look, I realized it was Snow, making me gasp in surprise. Cashin followed my gaze and drove the car a bit closer. Confirming it was indeed Snow, I saw her walking out of the resort hotel arm in arm with a man, their body language unmistakably intimate. The man escorted Snow to her car and, before she got in, leaned down to kiss her on the lips, then closed the door for her. The man accompanying Snow wasn't Mason. Had they just checked out of a room? Very curious? Cashin's voice came by my ear. I quickly averted my gaze, giving him an awkward smile. "Just grabbing some popcorn." Kidding me? My ex's current partner cheating? That's the juiciest gossip ever. With my natural nose for drama, it's hard not to get excited. That man is the president of Minching Bank. Huh? I widened my eyes, staring at Cashin. "You know him?" He raised an eyebrow. "We've crossed paths before, not familiar." "Wait, isn't Minching Bank the very place Mason is working at now?" "This is, boss and fiancé, scandalous." "Teresa, are you happy?" Seeing me pursing my lips to suppress a laugh, Cashin moved his handsome face closer, his dark eyes fixed intently on me. Schadenfreude isn't something to openly admit, so I shook my head. "No, just suddenly thought of a joke." As for running into Snow, while I was curious, I didn't dig too deep into it. After all, now that Cashin and I are officially married, and Mason is preparing to wed her. As long as they don't provoke me, I naturally won't go looking for trouble. Regarding those videos I took, even though I said I wanted revenge, in the end Mason did save my life once. I'm not like him, I can't bring myself to ruin his reputation completely, not to mention those could be considered obscene materials, and mishandling them might land me in legal trouble. However, Mason clearly doesn't see it that way. He seems determined to get under my skin. Almost every day, he would come to pick up Snow from work. As if on purpose, he always timed it to coincide with Cashin picking me up, deliberately flaunting Snow's pregnant belly in front of me and Cashin. Despite her flat stomach, Snow would always act as if she were on the verge of giving birth whenever she was around us. Time and again, she would look at me with pity in her eyes and say, "Teresa, I really envy you for not having to bear children. I just got pregnant, and already I'm either suffering from morning sickness or craving food." Thankfully, Mason spoils me, he gives me whatever I want. Every time this happened, Mason would play the role of the perfect husband, wrapping his arm around her and saying, "As a first-time father, it's only natural I take good care of you." Cashin and I were truly speechless seeing their affected behavior, but in the same company, it was really hard to avoid them. I thought I would have to endure these two for a while, but unexpectedly, a stroke of good fortune came our way. Someone had exposed Snow's affair with the bank manager, and it blew up into quite a scandal. The manager's wife came to the office and gave Snow a beating. Because of this, Snow stopped coming to work, and Cashin and I finally had some peace. But what surprised me even more was that, in just about a week, Snow sent out her wedding invitations, yes, with the bank president, to our colleagues. That's right, her wedding invitations with the bank president. Everyone in the office was stunned, thinking they must have misread it. After all, not long ago, she and Mason had publicly announced their engagement, and the two of them had taken every opportunity to flaunt their disgustingly sweet relationship at the office. And now, instead of waiting for her wedding invitations with Mason, we got ones with the bank president. I was genuinely curious, and after some inquiry, I found out that after Snow's affair with the bank president was exposed, the president's wife confronted Snow and then quickly divorced the president. She took her share of the divorce settlement and left without another word. The whole thing was clean and decisive. As a result, Snow simply stayed with the bank president, and more importantly, the child she was carrying was his. As for Mason, he was just the fall guy Snow found, and now that the real father had stepped up, he was naturally kicked to the curb. The whole situation was so dramatic that practically everyone in my social circle knew about it. Mason came to me just as I was telling my parents about this. I wasn't trying to kick him while he was down, but I honestly thought he had it coming. Looking at Mason standing outside the door with dark circles under his eyes and a scruffy beard, I hadn't even spoken when he said, "Teresa, I'm sorry." I frowned and gave him a cold look. "What do you want?" He looked at me with pleading eyes. "I wronged you. I sincerely apologize." As he spoke, he suddenly knelt down and slapped himself hard. "I'm such a scoundrel, Teresa. Snow was the one who egged me into doing those things back then. I know I was wrong now. Please forgive me, okay? Just remembering how I once saved you, give me one more chance. I truly love you and don't want to lose you." Looking at him like this, I was utterly disgusted and planned to shut the door directly. His eyes filled with pleading as he said to me, "Teresa, do you still remember what you promised me back in the hospital?" My hand froze mid-action. Seeing my hesitation, he continued, "You said that no matter what mistakes I made in the future, you would give me one chance." Yes, because he had saved my life once, I had promised him that no matter what wrong he might do in the future, I would give him one chance. Huh. How shameless of him to bring this up now. Suppressing the nausea in my chest, all I wanted right now was for him to leave. "Mason, you." "Teresa." My parents interrupted me. My father looked at me with a mix of helplessness and affection. I understood his silent message. He knew exactly what I was thinking at that moment. After a prolonged silence, seeing the resignation in my parents' eyes, I took a deep breath. They had spent their entire lives being good people, and now I found myself trapped by that very label. Gazing at Mason kneeling on the floor, I finally said, "Mason, get up." Seeing my expression soften, Mason was overjoyed. "Teresa, you forgive me, you're really willing to give me another chance?" Damn it, if I could, I'd rather have died in that car accident years ago than be saved by a scumbag like him. Mason was ushered into the house by my parents. Suppressing my fury, I really didn't want to lay eyes on him again. Just as I was slamming the door angrily, I suddenly caught sight of a tall figure standing on the stairway. "Cashin." I startled, nearly blurting out, "How long have you been here?" He looked at me with deep, somber eyes, and after a long pause, finally spoke, "Did I come at a bad time?" I meant to shake my head, but thoughts of Mason, who had been taken in by my parents, made me hesitate. "I'll go back first and wait for your answer," he said, his tone revealing neither joy nor anger. Watching him turn to leave, my heart clenched. "Cashin." He stood with his back to me, silent, as if waiting for me to speak first. Calling him in now would make my parents hesitant, they definitely wouldn't be able to explain things clearly to Mason. Besides, I feel the same way, no matter what, this time I have to sever this debt of gratitude with Mason. Bringing Cashin into it wouldn't be appropriate. Taking a deep breath, I said, "I'll handle it as soon as possible, it won't take long. Go ahead with your work." I'll head back first. He cut me off, barely giving me a chance to speak further before hastily leaving. Watching his retreating figure, for some reason, I sensed a hint of desolation in it. Without dwelling on it further, I went back inside. My parents frowned at Mason, their faces filled with annoyance. When they saw me enter, they all turned to me as if waiting to see what I would say to Mason. "Teresa, I promise I'll treat you better from now on, love you properly, I swear." "Mason," I interrupted his pretentious words, "I never loved you. Not from the start, not even a moment of fondness for you." He stared at me blankly, his face full of confusion. "Haven't we been together for 3 years? Do you really not understand why I've been with you these 3 years?" I retorted, my heart utterly calm. "I repaid your life-saving kindness with 3 years. During this time, my parents never refused any of your requests, whether it was your job, your life, or even your parents. My family spared no effort to help you. I was even ready to dedicate my entire life to repay this debt." Taking a deep breath, I continued, "But perhaps fate still had mercy on me, letting me see your true nature before marrying you, allowing me to cut my losses in time." Mason's face turned deathly pale. "Teresa, what do you mean by this?" Looking at his utterly ordinary face, I said, "What I mean is, the debt of gratitude I owed you, my family and I have long since repaid it over these 3 years. If it weren't for my family exhausting all our resources, seeking doctors everywhere, covering expenses, and dedicating ourselves to caring for your mother, do you really think she'd still be standing in front of you, given your own capabilities? And your job, with your education and background, do you honestly believe you'd have become a bank manager in this lifetime? Mason, a person should know when to quit while they're ahead. You can keep trying to leverage this so-called favor against me, but of course, I wouldn't mind giving you a taste of how it feels to have nothing left." "Teresa." My parents tried to interject. I glanced at them sideways and said, "Mom, Dad, I understand your concerns. But I've already backed down enough. If Cashin hadn't appeared back then, do you really think that video would have been so easy to handle? The consequences would have been something our family could never have survived. Mason never intended to leave us any way out to begin with. If Cashin hadn't stepped in back then, what Mason wanted was for me to grovel and beg him. In the end, my parents and I would have been exploited for the rest of our lives. He wanted the wealth and connections my parents left me, just to prop up his own life. Once he's finished using us, he'll kick us aside, and we won't even know how we died. There are countless cases of gold-digging men preying on wealthy families in this world, let alone scum like Mason. Teresa, how could you think of me like that? Looking at Mason's hypocritical face, I felt utterly disgusted and cut him off bluntly. Stop pretending, it's disgusting, Mason. I've made myself clear enough. If you keep pushing, don't blame me for being ruthless. He fell silent, his mask of hypocrisy ripped away, revealing a twisted ugliness. After a long pause, his expression darkened. Without another word, he turned and walked away in silence. Teresa, he left like this, will there be? Mother voiced her concerns with some worry. I shook my head, it's fine. A petty man who only cares about profit can't stir up any trouble. After sending Mason away, I chatted with my parents for a long time. By the time I remembered to message Cashin, it was already midnight, and thinking it might disturb his rest, I decided against it. The next day was the weekend, and originally, I had planned to go try on wedding dresses with Cashin. But when I woke up in the morning, I felt dizzy and exhausted. My mother came into my room when she noticed I hadn't gotten up and realized I had a fever. She gave me some medicine, and in my daze, I sent Cashin a message saying we'd try on the wedding dresses another day before I drifted off into a hazy sleep. I slept until the afternoon. When I woke up, my throat was still very sore. Voices echoed in the living room. Thinking it was Cashin coming to visit me, I put on my coat and went out. Seeing Noah sitting in the living room, he was sitting very properly on the sofa chatting with my parents, making the two elders extremely happy. When he saw me coming out, he immediately got up and ran toward me, hugging me, and saying, "Auntie, are you feeling better?" I nodded and couldn't resist pinching his little face. Did you come here alone? The driver brought me here. He's waiting for me downstairs. Pulling me to sit on the sofa, the little guy stared at me for a while, his mouth opening slightly as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. Seeing him like this, I couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong? Do you have something to tell me?" His lips pressed tightly together, as though he'd mustered a great deal of courage. "Auntie, are you giving up on Uncle?" I was taken aback. Huh? Who said that? Uncle hasn't left his room since coming home yesterday, and he's been drinking, Noah said with wide, earnest eyes. This morning Grandpa reminded him he was supposed to accompany you for wedding dress selection today, but he said you weren't going. I found it amusing. "So, you thought I didn't want your uncle anymore? And came here to question me?" "And no," the little one shook his head repeatedly, "I came to return something to you." Watching the child stuff a delicate bag into my hand, I curiously took it out to look. "What are you returning?" Mid-sentence, I froze as I saw the light green scarf in my hand, bewildered as I looked at Noah. "This." Seeing my surprise, Noah said, "Don't you remember, Auntie? This is from when you bandaged my wound." For a moment, I was at a loss, staring at him blankly. "Noah, when did I ever bandage your—" Looking at the familiar scarf, it suddenly hit me, this scarf was indeed mine. However, 2 years ago while I was on a business trip, I encountered a car accident. The car involved was badly damaged, with fuel leaking from the tank. There was a child inside who was still breathing. I struggled so hard to pull the child out, and they were covered in blood. To stop the bleeding, I tied the scarf around the child's wound at the time. I remember that car accident happened at night. After the police and ambulance arrived, I left. Looking closely at Noah's face, I realized I hadn't actually seen the appearance of the child I rescued back then. To my surprise, he turned out to be quite handsome. I couldn't help but smile and ask, "That was so long ago. How did you know it was me?" I remember he was only about 5 or 6 years old at the time. Besides, during the accident, his parents died, so he must have been severely traumatized. How could he possibly remember what I looked like? Holding my hand, Noah said with utmost seriousness, "The scent. I remember your scent, the same as the one on the scarf. And my uncle, he saw you." "Cashin?" I was stunned and couldn't help but pull him aside to sit down, asking seriously, "You mean your uncle saw me back then?" After watching him being taken away by the ambulance that year, I left. I didn't pay attention to anything else at the time. Could Cashin have been there too? Noah seemed a bit unclear, but after thinking for a moment, he said, "Uncle asked the police and even looked for you. Grandpa said he wanted to thank you." A child's train of thought isn't very smooth, but after talking with him for a while, I roughly understood that after the car accident, Cashin learned about me from the police. Later, he probably called to thank me. But later I refused, and after that, their family paid me a little more attention. Come to think of it, indeed, someone did call me afterward to express their gratitude, but I felt it was just a small favor, anyone would have helped in that situation, so I declined outright. Later, I completely forgot about the matter. Now that I think back, it feels almost surreal. Recalling the time I met Cashin at the Hot Spring Hotel, I suddenly froze. Could that also be the reason Cashin helped me back then? I looked at Noah and asked, "Noah, is your uncle home now?" He nodded, looking at me expectantly. "Auntie, are you going to see him?" Having dealt with Mason's matter, I was originally planning to meet Cashin. Now, hearing Noah's words, I had some questions I wanted to ask him. Arriving at Cashin's house, the old man seemed to be out, leaving the large villa courtyard empty. Noah pointed to the room on the second floor and said, "Auntie, that's Uncle's room. He drank a lot of wine and wouldn't let anyone in." I frowned. Why would Cashin drink heavily for no reason? Noah still had piano lessons and was taken away by the driver. I went upstairs and knocked on the door. Before I could speak, a low, hoarse voice came from inside, "Don't bother me." "Cashin?" I spoke softly against the door. The room fell silent for a moment. Thinking the person inside hadn't heard, I tried to speak again. Cashin. Bang. The door was suddenly yanked open. A strong smell of alcohol and smoke made me instinctively frown, and then I unexpectedly came face to face with Cashin, who stood half a head taller than me. Looking at the man before me, his face flushed, eyes bloodshot, and hair disheveled, I almost thought I had the wrong person. Thankfully, the face was still the same one, and even in this state, he was so handsome it was almost unrecognizable. How did you drink so much? I suddenly cut him off, pushing past him as I entered the room. The curtains were drawn, the lights off, the room was pitch black. I pulled open the curtains, taking in the pile of liquor bottles by the sofa and the small mountain of cigarette butts in the ashtray. I pursed my lips and turned to glare at Cashin, who was following closely behind me. Drinking and smoking, Cashin, you. Before I could finish speaking, he suddenly pulled me directly into his embrace. His sturdy arms held me so tightly that I could barely breathe. After struggling for a moment to no avail, I gave up. After letting him hold me for a while, I finally drew a deep breath and said, Cashin, if you keep holding me like this, I'm going to suffocate in your arms. Only then did he loosen his grip, his dark eyes anxiously scanning me, his voice hoarse. Did I hurt you? Looking at him, so unlike his usual dignified and elegant self, I found it amusing. So, can you tell me now why you suddenly drank so much and smoked so many cigarettes? The man fixed his dark eyes on me, with a hint of grievance if you looked closely. You and Mason. Seeing him looking genuinely wronged, I couldn't resist. So, you're torturing yourself like this because you thought Mason and I got back together? And that I don't want you anymore? He suddenly looked at me, his face full of seriousness. Do you really not want me anymore? I couldn't hold back and threw a punch at him, laughing out of sheer frustration. Cashin, are you an idiot? Didn't I tell you yesterday? I'll talk to Mason as soon as possible and make sure he stops bothering me. How did you get from that to thinking I don't want you anymore? He froze for a moment, his handsome lips pursing slightly, then said, Then why did you say this morning that you weren't going to try on the wedding dress? I frowned. I have a cold, so I said we'd reschedule. He furrowed his brow and silently handed me his phone. I glanced at the message I had sent in the morning, not going to try on the wedding dress. I was too groggy in the morning and just hastily typed a few words before sending them off, not realizing the content might make him overthink. Facing his aggrieved yet stubborn expression, I softened my tone and said, I'm sorry. My head was all fuzzy this morning, so I didn't pay attention to what I sent or that you might overanalyze it. Seeing that my explanation was somewhat acceptable, he became serious again and gave a quiet Judging by his reaction, he was probably appeased. I stepped closer to him, ready to give him a hug. Lately, he had been the one initiating everything, while I had never really shown him my affection. No wonder he reacted this way. But just as I approached him, he suddenly took a step back. I paused, puzzled. What's wrong? He opened his mouth, looking slightly uncomfortable. I'm filthy. I need a shower. With that, he dashed straight into the bathroom. Did he have to be so concerned about his image? The sound of running water came from the bathroom. With nothing better to do, I called a maid to clean the room. Looking at a group photo placed on the bedside, I couldn't help but move closer to take a careful look. The photo showed a family of 4. Upon closer inspection, it was likely Cashin's parents, him, and his older brother. In the picture, Cashin appeared quite young, probably around 15 or 16 years old, but based on his features, it was still recognizable as him. Cashin's mother was holding a lazy little cat in her arms, a calico, very beautiful. Her name is Sway Sway, a voice came from behind. It was Cashin, already out of the shower. Freshly bathed, he was only wrapped in a towel around his waist, his hair half dry, and drops of water still clinging to his bare upper body. The glistening water droplets rolled down his sun-kissed skin inch by inch. Unconsciously, my gaze lingered on the toned definition of his abs and the sculpted lines of his obliques. Really, quite a sight to behold. Teresa. Cashin began, his voice laced with discomfort. I quickly averted my eyes, awkwardly muttering, "Nice abs by the way." Damn my slip of the tongue. A few painfully awkward seconds of silence passed before I hastily added, "You go ahead and change. I'll take a walk downstairs." After saying that, I almost fled in embarrassment. Arriving at Cashin's backyard, I patted my flushed cheeks. The allure of a handsome man is no joke. "Teresa." I turned toward the voice and saw Grandpa, sitting on a stone bench, grooming a calico cat. Remembering the cat in the photo from Cashin's room, which looked exactly like this one, I walked over to Grandpa and asked, "Grandpa, is this Sway Sway?" Grandpa nodded. "Cashin told you?" I hummed in agreement, stroking Sway Sway's head and said, "I saw it in the framed photo in Cashin's room." "How old is it now?" 16 years old. It was my first time seeing such an elderly cat, and I couldn't help but feel curious. I picked up a cat teaser to play with it, but it didn't seem very active. Grandpa chuckled. "This one, ever since we got it back 3 years ago, has become really lazy. Now it just loves to bask in the sun." "Did it ever get lost?" I casually asked. Grandpa nodded. "This little guy ran away back then, got startled, and even caused a car accident while dashing across the road." Hearing Grandpa's words, I couldn't help but think back to that incident 3 years ago and found myself staring closely at Sway Sway. The cat that had darted in front of my car during that accident 3 years ago seemed. At this thought, I looked at my grandfather and asked, "Where did the accident happen? Was it serious?" Grandpa thought for a moment and said, "I can't quite remember. When Cashin went over there, the girl in the car was badly injured and unconscious. Cashin pulled her out of the car and arranged for her to be taken to the hospital. Thankfully, she wasn't in critical condition." Listening to Grandfather's words, I couldn't help but wonder. In this world, do coincidences truly happen so often? I remembered when Cashin and I first met, he asked me if I really didn't remember him. At that time, I thought he was just saying it casually, but now it seems. Thinking of this, I abruptly rushed to Cashin's room. "Cashin." As soon as I reached the doorway, I collided right into him. He pulled me into his arms, concern in his voice. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" I shook my head and, without hesitation, asked, "Was it you who pulled me out of the car 3 years ago?" He was taken aback. "How did you know?" After asking, he suddenly stopped. As our eyes met, I could almost confirm it was him. So, back then, that bastard Mason had outright lied to me. It wasn't him who rescued me from the car. No wonder after the incident, he kept being vague, saying he had stayed with me after calling the ambulance, never mentioning how he got me out of the car. Turns out, it wasn't him at all. Looking up at Cashin, I grumbled, "So, you recognized me back at the Hot Spring Hotel?" Seeing that I had mostly figured it out, he pulled me into the room and told me everything. 3 years ago, after he rescued me from the car, the ambulance arrived. Seeing I was taken away by the ambulance, he went to find Sway Sway. Later, he came to the hospital to look for me, but he only met Mason. Because Mason had always been by my side, he thought Mason was my boyfriend, so he gave him some money, saying it was to apologize on behalf of Sway Sway. Until 2 years ago, when I unintentionally saved Noah, he was essentially meeting me for the second time. After that, he reached out to me a few times, but I turned down all his attempts to express gratitude. Over the past 2 years, he had noticed me, intentionally or not. But since I was always preoccupied with Mason, even if someone like him had appeared around me, I probably wouldn't have remembered. It wasn't until that day at the Hot Spring Hotel, when Mason humiliated me so badly, that he heard about what happened and proposed to marry me, offering to solve all my problems. After hearing his words, I pressed my lips together and looked at him with a smile, asking, "So, Cashin, you didn't fall for me at first sight, you've been scheming for a long time?" He gave a faint smile. "You could say that." The next time I heard about Mason was on the day of my wedding with Cashin. He came to disrupt the wedding but was stopped by Cashin's bodyguards outside the hotel, looking utterly disheveled. I didn't see him, but my parents heard about his recent news. After he left my house that day, he went to find Snow. Perhaps out of revenge, he pushed Snow down the stairs, and Snow lost her child. Without the child, the bank president was furious and directly got Mason fired, even arranging for him to be sent to prison for over 10 days. As for Snow, it seemed she didn't fare well either. The bank president believed she still had lingering ties with Mason and made her suffer quite a bit. Hearing my parents recount these events, I smiled faintly, lifted my wedding dress's hem, and walked toward the grand hall, stepping into a new chapter of my life.